Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where I talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Notorious, as well as the latest episode of the Blacklist. So, slip of the tongue there. Like always, if, for instance, you don't want to hear what I have to say about Notorious, just look in the description down below, and I'll include the time slot you can skip to hear my thoughts on about the Blacklist. Now starting off with Notorious. We see in this episode Julia's kind of dealing with the aftermath of, whole Levi killing himself in front of her. First she has a whole meeting with the new DA, Max, and she ends up running into Jake because Jake's whole new thing is Levi killed himself. It's so now we have no choice but to be the fact is he killed himself. It's sad, but it kind of shows you hey, he might have been guilty of something. So it's hey, let's get Oscar out of jail. And, and it kind of comes up later on in the episode, but rather than asking how she was, the first thing he did was ask, oh, so you're talking to the new DA, so what are you going to say to him? And she doesn't really kind of respond and just walks away because it's he didn't bother asking. It's something I immediately noticed too, is that's why she kind of brushed him off like that. It's because a man killed himself in front of me. I get it, you're concerned about your client and everything, but you didn't ask about my well-being first. You didn't ask how I was. And it's kind of something we see in this episode. It's kind of how, because it almost seems like Jake and Julia are very cut from the same cloth in the sense of they're kind of willing to do anything, for obviously, Jake do anything for the firm, kind of do anything for his clients, and the same thing for Julia, do anything for, the news, get a really good, tantalizing segment. So it's just kind of interesting to see them kind of seeing that aspects of them, it's coming back to kind of bite them in the ass. It's kind of inadvertently kind of ends up causing a divide between Julia and Jake. Kind of the first, we've seen it a little bit here and there, but it's I think so far in this season, this has kind of been the biggest divide, I think. Because there was even that point, Megan and Luis were asking Julia about running the tape, that Oscar had sent, the recording had sent to her, talking about she got the story wrong, kind of using that as oh yeah, Oscar did it, but it's Julia knows the truth, but she didn't really bring it up to anyone. She ended up telling Jake the truth about the whole Levi situation. She was basically she got pissed at Luis and Megan being if it's okay with you, I'd rather not basically besmirch the name of a man who committed suicide, kind of throwing all these more accusations against him and stuff like that, knowing what she knows now. Because, I find it a little ironic because it's she's getting a little uppity about this, but it's it's kind of no different from the situation where Luis was kind of pissed at her from 2 episodes ago about the whole soldier story that, it's because they're acting like that, oh, why aren't you going to run the tape and stuff like that? It's because that's what you would normally do. It's so interesting, kind of seeing where Julia kind of draws the line, because it seems like she takes advantage of anything, because as long as it means getting a good story. You even see it later on, because her and Max kind of got a little bit of a repertoire. I'm just butchering that word. They got a thing going on, it's kind of what I'm trying to say. God, I'm just the worst. And it seemed hey, they're hitting it off and everything, but she kind of blindsides him on air when she kind of basically threw the recording of Levi up, even though he didn't know about it, even though she told Jake that she wasn't going to do it, but she did it anyway because she wanted to kind of get a rise out of him. In her words, she was I set it up and it's your job to knock it down. He's oh, you're just a terrible person. He's I thought that you were a news producer, but it's apparently you're just a mouthpiece for Jake, because Jake, it was something Jake would have done. So, and it just kind of hurt, because everyone that was in the room were just kind of ooh, because he got super pissed about it. But it's in Julia's defense, what she was trying to do was Julia was suffering with this whole thing. It's she tried to pretend she was okay. Obviously, it was getting to her. She thought what she could do was bury her head in her work, but even that wasn't enough, because it started interfering with work. That's why she just wasn't acting like herself. She wasn't on top of her game, which, I say, it's funny because it seems some of the stuff she did in this episode seemed like something Julia would do nevertheless, but I'm guessing well, I guess your argument could be like, well, at the very least, she knew when to pick her battles, but now she's just kind of all over the place. She just, Jake kind of explains it best of being like, Julia knows what kind of buttons to push, what kind of situations to kind of make the best television. It's like, yeah, the whole segment with Max was okay. It was good, but she knew, like, it was a little stale. Like, good is not good enough for Julia with the way she does her thing, the way her mind works with this whole newscasting producing thing. She knew, like, hitting him with that curveball was what was going to spice up the show. And also, she kind of wanted to see him squirm a little. There's a part of her that wanted to see him kind of squirm a little bit. Maybe in her own way, that was kind of her flirting a little bit. I don't know. I mean, because for one, it's like, this Matt kind of presents a new thing for her. Like, he's going to be like possibly the new guy in her life. I mean, obviously, you don't jump to any kind of conclusions. We'll kind of see where it goes from here. But, she probably hasn't dated since the whole Eric thing kind of blew up. I mean, especially because he tried to come back into her life, but she's like, nah. And then last episode, her and Luis kind of, the very same episode, that she ran into him again, but ended up burning his pictures with Luis. So it's kind of like she is trying to move on, and it seems like Max might be the right step. Whether Max is 100% a good guy or not, I don't know. I guess legitimately in this show, it's almost like you can't tell who's actually a good guy or not. I mean, I brought that up from the very beginning. It's such a gray area with some of the stuff that they do. They don't go about things the best way. But essentially, Max, it seems like he's setting everything up to kind of go after Jake, because he ended up getting a picture of Jake and Sarah because they got it out of Levi's desk. And so basically he kind of flaunted that in front of Jake, which kind of pissed Jake off and kind of made him think like, oh, the only person that had that picture was Julia. So it's like he kind of started blaming her, but it's just kind of like he was in a tailspin about the whole situation. So it's just hard on him. But Oscar ended up getting the picture because the DA sent it to him. The moment I saw, I was like, oh man, everything is falling apart now. Oscar got super pissed, fired Jake, because he fired him after punching him in the face, just because like I can find some other hack to do better than that. It's like, well, no, I don't think you're going to find anyone better than Jake, because Jake was motivated to make sure you stay out of jail, because in a way, is it because he really likes you? I don't know. I don't know how Jake really feels about Oscar. At the very least, I mean, especially knowing that even if it was in the past, at some point he abused Sarah, that he beat her up, and he's like, no matter, even if he was like, oh, I apologize and Sarah forgave me, it still doesn't erase what you did. So I'm sure that doesn't sit well with Jake. But, there's also the side of him that's like, well, Oscar's still his client. So however he feels about Oscar, he's still got to give Oscar the best defense. Plus, on some level, he might feel like he owes it to Sarah to kind of, get the truth. It's kind of the main thing. And I figured it was that it was a play by the DA, because I was like, the only person that could have given him that picture was the DA, and it turns out it was him testing to see if Oscar really knew, because if Oscar knew about the affair, that could be motive for him killing Sarah. But because because of the way Oscar reacted, it's like he didn't know about the affair, so it's like there goes his motive. But now, like I said, he's like, give me all the information you got on Jake. And so it's like he's turning everything, kind of looking after Jay. So I'm very interested to see where this puts Julia in the next episode and just in the future. It's just because it seems like she's kind of got a thing for Max. There's a little bit of flirtation between them and everything, but it's like Jake is still her friend. And I don't really know, because early in the episode he was asking her, I was like, oh, how well do you know Jake? She's like, well, how well do you know anyone? Like, I feel like Julia's smart enough to know, like, that question was kind of pointing that direction, but maybe she was still so caught up in everything that she just didn't really pay it too much attention. Or maybe it was such a, like, because the moment he started we had as the audience had the advantage of seeing the photo, so we knew why he was asking such a question. But I guess to her it was just kind of the new DA trying to flesh out and see who Jake was. Maybe that's all Julia kind of chalked it up to. But like, I don't know. Another big side of this episode, well, kind of what we had Jake taking on a case. At the same time, this case also led us to learning some more stuff about Jake. For instance, finding out that he's actually a foster kid, that him and Bradley aren't actual like biological brothers, they're foster brothers. Which, I find very interesting because obviously that's never come up in their dynamic before, because it's not like for Bradley, even for Jake, it's not like, oh, we're foster brothers. It's like, no, we're brothers. There's no foster about it. We're simply brothers, we're family. And so that was so this case he picked up with the young lady Jenna was very important to him. Essentially, that I really like that. I mean, besides just how it actually had a happy ending and everything, but just because I kept wondering, I was like, why is that lawyer Maggie stalling? It's like, I was like, she must have something up her sleeve. She's like, oh, I can't divulge that information and stuff about the parents. It's like, why is she stalling? And it's like, oh yeah, the reason why she's stalling is because the entire thing is a scam. She lied to Maggie. She lied to Jenna. She lied to the family that's trying to adopt the baby, because she had Jenna think that she was inseminated with the egg and the sperm from the mom and dad. But it's like the parents aren't the biological parents. They're there to adopt the baby, but they were told that Jenna ended up miscarrying. It was just like all a lie. That basically they paid Maggie $200,000, even though Maggie, God, no, not Maggie, Jenna only wanted $50,000, and basically Maggie pocketed the other $150,000. And what makes the situation even more deplorable is the fact of the matter is that she was going to double sell the baby. That basically when the whole thing fell through, she was going to sell the baby again to another family to make even more money. It's like, you piece of crap. She's like talking about, even try to throw Jake on the bus. It's like, actually, it's your fault too. You realize none of this would have happened if you had not put Jenna on TV. I could have sold her to another family. And then Jake was like, there you go. You let the truth slip. It's like, you're a disgusting human being. You suck. You suck. You suck. Because it could have turned into a very terrible situation, because yes, the family showed up. Jenna gave birth to the baby. The baby was healthy and was giving it to these adoptive parents. But the child services stepped up because, Jake putting her on air kind of ended up backfiring, because it's like, technically she can't give the baby away from adoption. Because for one, she doesn't have any legal rights because she's just bearing the child. So she doesn't have any legal rights over the baby. So that means the baby doesn't have a legitimate parent to kind of represent them. So she can't give the baby up for adoption because the parents need to be a part of it. So it's like, oh, go find the parents. But luckily you end up finding out that, hey, it's not that type of situation, because there was no parents involved, because Maggie ended up buying the sperm and the egg. So it's like with a situation where someone donates sperms and egg, they automatically kind of sign a non-disclosure agreement to basically cut off their rights. It's like they give up any rights the moment they kind of give away their sample, essentially. So luckily Jenna was able to give the baby to the family. It was just like, it's kind of beautiful that it kind of worked out that way. So this is one of those rare cases so far that we've seen that Jake has actually gotten very personal with the case. He's always been very level-headed, but because it's a situation where it's like, if they hadn't found the parents, if they hadn't resolved this situation, the baby would have basically been put in foster care. And he's like, no child should be, just kind of left into the system like that. He was kind of basically put in the system because his dad would not give up rights to him, for 8 years. It wasn't until he was 8 that Bradley's family adopted him. And, he's like, kind of brings and it was just kind of like one of those tearjerker moments where he's just like, Bradley was like, I don't know what I'd do if I didn't have you as a brother. I'm like, God, that's so beautiful. That's so beautiful. It really got to me, man. I was like, man, bringing it back, they don't treat each other like foster brothers. They treat each other like family. They are just pure and simple brothers. And I think that's kind of why they waited to this particular episode to come and let you know that, because it's like establishing them right off the bat. The fact is they did, because in some situations you might have someone kind of someone might treat their foster sibling as, an outsider, might not oh, you're not my brother, you're my foster brother. Let's not get too cozy like that. But it's like you see the bond that they have with each other, and I guess that was kind of to establish that first, and now showing you that they're foster brothers. But it's kind of representing the fact is that, hey, even though they're foster brothers, they don't look at each other like that. We grew up as brothers, and that's simply all we are. We will always just be brothers. And I just thought that was kind of sweet. I'm very curious to know whether or not Julia will have any ramifications. Well, not ramifications, just like long lasting effects. I mean, because in this part there was like a point in the episode where she was actually scrubbing the blood off her shoes and she was crying because it's just like it's not something you can snap back from. She, as like I brought up earlier, like she tried to dive herself into work, but that still wasn't enough to kind of ease the situation. It still just kept haunting her, and it's not something. I'm wondering, like, will there be any long lasting effects as we see the season kind of progress? And like I said, we kind of got a little more background on Jake this episode. I'm curious, we'll kind of get any more on Julia. Cause we got a little bit from Maggie's perspective on how Maggie was saying, like, hey, like basically there was a story that Maggie had someone wrote that basically it was about somebody having an affair, and Maggie, both her sources had lied to her. The information they were giving about there being an affair with this particular person was false. And she was like, that Julia at the time told her, like, oh, you can only run the stories that, with the information they're given at that time. And then, Julia said something like, well, maybe I was wrong because she felt guilty about this whole Levi situation. It's like, you didn't push him, like, which she feels responsible because she feels like she pushed him into that corner because giving out false information. And that's another side of it too. Like, will this affect her in a more positive way? Will she be like less likely to quickly jump to, putting up a story without all the information first? Even if it's like a juicy story, will she be a lot more hesitant in the future, or will she kind of snap back into her old self and kind of go about it the way she normally does? I'm very curious to see how that like goes about. And I'm very curious to see what Oscar's going to do now, because it's like, oh, like, he's going to find a different lawyer. I'm guessing his lawyer is going to try and point things towards Jake. I mean, because it's like everything is going to start pointing towards Jake now, because it's like, well, he had the biggest motive because, hey, maybe he found out about Sarah being abused by Oscar in the past or something like that. And, well, no. That was completely stupid. I don't know where I was about to go with that. Essentially, their affair, I'm thinking, what I meant to say was like, the fact is that maybe he asked her to leave Oscar, but she wouldn't, and he got in a rage, ended up killing her or something like that, crime of passion type of thing. They could easily twist it like that. So I'm very curious to see where that kind of goes. Like I said, the DA seems very dead set on diving into Jake's past, and maybe that would be something, well, Jake as a person, and maybe we'll end up finding out a little bit more about Jake in that regard. And now moving on to the Blacklist. So many things. For one, I was curious when the episode started. I was like, where was Samar and Iran kind of sitting at in this episode? And it seems like they're okay. A little awkward around each other, especially when Iran's girlfriend kind of FaceTimed him. Basically, the washing machine was kind of messing up, broken, leaking water everywhere. And Samar just happened to be nearby, and like Iran kind of like out of like almost like he was caught masturbating, kind of closes his laptop. It's just like, oh no, it's a dishwasher. He brings up the fact is that he kind of hand washes stuff and being like, oh, it's not her fault. I don't know, like he was trying to justify like his girlfriend to Samar in some shape or form, trying to be like, no, she's not like a screw up or anything. She's a good person. It's not her fault, that whole situation. It's always been finicky. I usually just hand dry my dishes and stuff like that. So I was like, that's kind of weird for you to put it like that, okay? But interestingly enough, Samar later on gets a call from his girlfriend. She basically wants to, like, oh, what's the perfect date? And she's like, okay, you're calling me? She's like, yeah, you're Iran's best friend. He tells you everything. I was like, wow, that's kind of interesting. It's kind of probably one of that situation where it's like when him and his girlfriend are together, the person he probably talks to about the most is Samar. So it's just kind of interesting that she would call her. I mean, the fact didn't matter. Like, Samar didn't even bring it up, but the fact is, like, you have my number. We don't know each other. We've never met each other yet. You have my phone number. Well, then granted, no. I was about to say she called his house, but it's like, no, she called Haran on the phone. Like, so that was just kind of interesting to me. That was kind of, I was like, man, how did you get my phone number? It's like maybe Haran gave it to her. I don't know. But basically asking for tips on how to give him a perfect date to kind of make up for the whole washing machine situation. And I like what Wrestler was saying later on. It's like, oh, that was kind of a good move on your part to kind of suggest this stuff like that. She's like, what do you mean good move? It's like, well, yeah, all the food, they put garlic on all the food at that particular restaurant, and he won't dare kiss her with all that garlic on her breast. A good move. She's like, it's not a good move. It's not like I was planning anything. But the fact of the matter is she knows Iran so well because she suggested all these different things that she knew he would like and everything. So, and well, for one, like she does kind of seem like maybe it's not necessarily a move because I feel like if it was a move, she would have picked something a little more. Oh, Iran doesn't like this, but I guess she's not trying to be petty or Samar's not that type of person to be like petty or something like that. But it does seem like however she wants to fight it, there is emotion at play here. Like there is a part of her that is trying that. She seems like this situation sits with her. I don't think it does. She's just kind of like pretending like it does. But the fact that she brings up, she's like, I don't trust her. There's just something about her that doesn't sit right with me. I'm like, oh, and that'd be kind of the interesting twist because it's like maybe she found herself in Iran's life for a particular reason, trying to get some information out of him. It seems like maybe she might be speaking out of jealousy, which she might be, but maybe there's a part of her that is right though. It's like just because you're suspicious of someone and maybe you're a little jealous doesn't mean you're not right. So maybe there's a lot more to it. I mean, we don't really know because there hasn't really been anything brought up, but it's like, I'm going to be interested to see what Samar does in the future when it comes to this girlfriend. Will she be kind of more like, will we see her kind of investigating her suspicions a lot more? I'm very curious also to know about the whole transfer situation. She sent the email through and everything, so how long will it be before that? I mean, I'm sure like there's a lot of paperwork involved, so transferring won't be happening necessarily soon. I don't know, because I guess part of me was, I was kind of idiotic and was thinking like it was going to happen immediately, but it's probably going to be a while, so maybe a lot of stuff will happen between now and then where she'll kind of reconsider. So, this week's episode, we had a very interesting blacklister delinquist concern. And then from the way Reddington was talking about it seemed like an organization, but we only really dealt with one person this episode. The dude's real name is Silas. And it's very interesting how he operates because he seems like such a low key, like he worked at a patent office and whatever. And it seemed like he was so low key that he was just kind of, well, no, he didn't actually work at did he work at a patent office? Because he pretended to be a lot of different people to kind of get towards people. No, he definitely did work in a patent office. I don't know. I was thinking about something else. I was being stupid. Sorry. But he pretended to be a lot of people. But my thing is like who he was at work compared to who he was when he was meeting with these different people, these different inventors and stuff like that was very staggering. Like his mannerisms, the way he talked, the way he acted, the fact that he didn't wear his glasses and stuff like that. He tried to be more professional. Like, it's like wearing a suit and everything. But when he got to work, it's like, oh, his boss treats him like crap. Oh, you're late. Oh, God, you're just a terrible employee. Wipe the dandruff off your shirt. He just seems like such a meek person. But then you see him when he's talking to the other people. I guess that's kind of the whole point, is to be very charismatic, changing the way he talks and the way he acts so that he can get, part of like, it's not just about what you say, it's how you say it. So it's by being very charismatic, being a different person, he's able to kind of draw people in and gain their trust. I mean, especially when he talks like he knows, exactly what they're doing. It's very interesting learning why he does what he does. Because normally the Lindquist concern, basically they get like, there's all these different ideas that people might have, that like big business ideas that could revolutionize the world, whether it's like medicine or some kind of invention that would help the world. And what they basically do is they take that idea and they bury it so that like, kind of get rid of competition, kind of say like maybe they're working on something similar and it's like, or basically they don't want that idea out there because it's like, oh, it's a multi-billion idea that basically someone is going to like, say like it's a medicine, for example, that would help. Well, you take the first guy, Omar. Basically, his device was going to make it so that you can transform salt water into drinkable water. So that, a lot of countries that didn't have access to clean water could use it. But, by getting rid of that, it's like, by killing him and getting rid of that idea, you bury it so you don't have to worry about like, something that could be cheap. Now you can make a product that's more expensive and easier to kind of exploit people, essentially, is what I'm talking about. Just kind of like how you can make a medicine that could be free to a lot of people, but it's like, no, why go about something a free and effective way when you can make a lot of money off of it? That the kind of greedy aspect of things. And that's kind of how they do it. But Silas was different because for him, it wasn't about doing things that way. For him, it was about doing things the exact opposite. He wanted to take all those patents and stuff, those ideas that all these smart people had, and he wanted to spread it across the world, which is a good thing and a bad thing. Good thing, obviously, because it's like it gives people, a lot of people, access to it. It means that, some company can't get their hands on that patent and kind of dilute it and kind of make like, this was going to be sold very cheaply. It's like, well, now that we have our hands on it, we can make it super expensive for people. So it's like they want to use this very awesome product. Well, they have to pay like a crap ton of money for it now. So instead of letting that happen, everyone has access to it. But the fact of the matter is, some of that proprietary knowledge, that patent stuff, could be stuff that other countries could use to kind of advance their technology and stuff like that, to kind of, turn it against the government, which, is kind of the downside. It's kind of why we get, what's her name, Laurel, played by, there's an actress named Kristen Lottie, getting her returning, and she's kind of like, no, we have to like stop that. We have to go in guns blazing, when Harold was kind of like, no, let's not do that, because we get a lot of people hurt. Because for Silas, it wasn't like, it seems like more so than anything for him, it was about revenge. Because basically it was part of a group that had an idea, they patented it, but the people that bought it ended up killing the idea 3 weeks later, and it never came out to daylight. I mean, came out. It was just kind of kept like that. So I guess I understand from that perspective, like, why he wants to do things, because it's like, oh, I don't want what happened to my idea happen to other people's. But the sad thing is, it's like, if that's the case, why kill the inventors? Why not work with them? But I guess I'm diving into his psychology. I guess I can understand why he killed them, because it's like, for one, he's warned different people about this in the past, but no one really listened. And I guess this was his way of kind of making people listen for the first time. And so what I'm guessing is he was afraid that if he actually did try to tell the people, I mean, who's to say he didn't try to tell people in the past, but they didn't listen and they gave their ideas away. And so he was just kind of upset about, so he went things about the way he did, killing them, so that now all that information is in his hands, and he's the one to kind of dish it out. Doesn't have to worry about like a third party messing with it or whatever. So, because I guess on another way you can look at it is like, who's to say that they will 100% believe them and still, because it's like a company could take this like very smart person and kind of offer them even more money to not follow what Silas is saying and just kind of go with that company. So I guess that's another reason why, to take them out, so they're not tempted. But still, it's one of those situations where in his mind the ends justify the means, but it's like, no, you killed a lot of smart, innocent people. Like I said, I get where you're coming from. You had kind of the right intentions, but like I said, it seems you more so than anything, more so than right intentions, it seems like you were literally motivated by revenge. It's like it was kind of your way of kind of giving the world a middle finger for you getting screwed over. It's like, I mean, that's how I ultimately look at it. And a final note, it's kind of the big thing in this episode was finding out, well, had that whole situation with Sebastian, which I love that conversation where Reddington's telling Dembe, he's like, all right, now when you fish him out of the water, also make sure he checks out that mole of yours. And Dembe's like, it's a freckle. And then the moment Dembe's walking away, you see Reddington just kind of shaking his head like, oh, whatever. But basically Sebastian helps them. They end up going after Kirk. Turns out, though, the whole situation is a trap. Liz tried to warn him at first. Dembe answered the phone and was like trying to tell Reddington it was a trap and tried to hand him the phone, but he closed the phone because he didn't want to listen to Liz. That was kind of like your first instance of that. Like normally he'd always listen to Liz, but now it's because her loyalty is divided. She herself kind of commented on the fact that she's caught in the middle. She knows Kirk has a lot of answers that she needs, but Reddington's like, I can't have you with me when I can't trust your loyalty, because it's like you're so dead set on believing Kirk is your dad, which we end up finding out he is. And so Reddington has lied about it, but I still have to bring it up. Liz had that whole memory thing about shooting someone. Was that just like Reddington? Was that kind of like a construct of like, hey, she was told this story, so her brain subconsciously created that memory? It's like, it can't be. Like I said, I still cannot stress it enough. She thinks Kirk's telling the truth and everything, which obviously the whole thing about being her dad, he possibly is. I mean, the information is saying that, and the fact is Reddington's silence at the end of the episode makes it seem like, yeah, that turns out to be the case, but there's still no telling what he could be lying about. Like I said, him and Reddington are both telling the truth and lying at the same time, because she still doesn't have the full picture is what I'm getting at. And it seems like, now after realizing, she's like, oh, you've been lying to me this entire time. From the moment we met, you've been lying to me, and just Reddington's not saying anything. And it's like, on multiple occasions, even Dembe's asked him to tell her the truth. She needs to know what's going on, but it's like he's been reluctant to tell the truth. And the question is why? It's always been like, hey, maybe he feels like if she knows the truth, he's going to lose her. But for what reason? What is so terrible that he has to hide it away, that he's had to stack lie upon lies? And once again, who's to say everything he's ever said was a lie? It's like, I don't know. It's hard to distinguish like between truth and lie, because you had Sebastian in this episode defending Kirk. He's like, Kirk is actually a good man. He's done the things he's done because he has his reasons. He cares for Agnes. He'd never hurt her. He's trying to keep her away from Reddington, just the same way he was trying to do with Liz. But it's just like, I don't know, Liz like, it seems like she does tend to lean more towards Kirk's side than she has Reddington's side. Like, because in the past she has leaned more, like, if she had to rely on anyone, she's always trusted Reddington. Even though they've had their differences and stuff like that, she's always kind of trusted him. But now it just seems like that relationship is falling apart right before Reddington's eyes. Because things don't always go good when Liz stops trusting Reddington. He's lost her trust in the past multiple times, but he's always managed to get it back. But with a situation like this, I don't know if he's going to get it back, because he had her believe that her dad was dead. In fact, that she was the one that killed him. So it's like, I don't know. I want to know, what is he like? I feel like the only person that'd be able to tell her the truth, for one, would be her mom. But it's like, I mean, the word is her mom's dead. Whether that's 100% true, don't know. But maybe her grandfather. Maybe that would motivate Reddington to kind of finally have them sit down, have a meet to meet. Like, they need to, but it's like, and also because of the grandfather, because when we met him last season, it was after Liz, quote unquote, died. So Alexander Kirk wasn't even in the picture until like nearing the end of the season. So what I'm curious about, though, is what does he have to say about Kirk? I feel like out of anyone, he should, have the most information. I mean, granted, obviously, Reddington has information, but he's just not spilling his beans. Because if it was as simple as like, oh, I need to get information on Kirk, why not ask the woman that you were in love with, her father, for that information? So the fact that he's not asking Liz's grandfather means he already has the information he needs. But it's like, if Liz wants the truth, I feel like the only person she's really going to get it from is her grandfather. And I get the feeling maybe eventually down the road she'll end up being able to track him down because of her mom's journal or something. And she goes to him without letting Reddington know that she went to visit him or something like that. I don't know. I feel like that could be easily where it goes. Two more notes. One, we have Dembe in this episode praying for forgiveness because of what happened to Cade. Because it kind of got brought up this episode. The guy that he hires to kind of torture people, he's like, oh yeah, like there's a wedding coming up, bring along Kate, and just kind of let the sour look on both Dembe and Reddington's face. So, Dembe blames himself for what happens. Like, Reddington's like, you didn't do anything. He's like, that's right, I didn't. When the situation came out, I stayed on the sidelines. I didn't stop it. So he gonna blame himself. I mean, granted, he doesn't have anything to, well, he does have, because what Reddington was trying to say is basically what happened to Kate rely like it's 100% on him because he's the one that pulled the trigger. Dembe did, but Dembe, feels like if he had stood up to Reddington and told him not to do this, convinced him not to, then maybe things would be different. But the thing is, I mean, she is still alive. I mean, I'm surprised we didn't get even a hint of that this episode. But I guess, it's trying to fill out the story and everything. With this whole Kirk situation, but yeah, like, I mean, you don't really have to worry so much because she is still alive and everything, but still that weighs heavy on him. And Liz had asked about it, and Reddington was like, he's asking for absolution for something that will never come. It's like Reddington realizes what a big thing it was killing Kate. Like, it doesn't seem like he's asking for forgiveness because he knows there is no forgiveness for what he did. He's done a lot of regrettable things in his life. And the thing is, does he regret it? I don't know. He hates that he had to do it, but he feels he had to do it because it's like he can't have someone he doesn't trust around. But the thing is, he's in a situation where he doesn't 100% trust Liz. But in no shape or form would he ever do that to her because he cares too much about Liz. he cared about Kate at one point in time, but because the fact is Kate could easily be used against him, which I'm still kind of betting on that might be where Kate's story ended up taking her. But I mean, that's just me. And the final other note I wanted to make is the fact of the matter is Laurel, the lady, and Rustler was still adamant about it. It's like, yo, you killed that lady who was that good woman last was it that last season? Yeah, you killed her, and it's like, I'm going to prove it. But interesting enough, so because I was like, okay, Harold's letting her walk around it. Like I was like, are we completely ignoring the fact is that she's part of the cabal and everything? But then she kind of throws it in everyone's face. It's like, well, the reason why Harold's handing over this drive to me with all these patents and stuff like that is because, well, I'm his boss's 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 boss. So, but the real interesting thing is the fact of the matter is that 2 of those patents or whatever went to Reddington. It was kind of part of a deal. It's like whatever income they make off these ideas or whatever the cabal does, he gets like 40. Like at first he was like 50%. No, what? I'm sorry, that's being too much. Let me be a little more generous. 45% of all money you make off this situation, I get a part of. So it's like you can. It's one of those situations. It's kind of like always the thing. You don't know whether you can trust Reddington or not because of the fact of the matter is he's always got his hands in every situation. Despises the cabal because of what they did to Liz, yet he's still working with them. But maybe he's working with them because he's slowly trying to bring it all crumbling down. He tried to do that like last season, but it didn't happen. That kind of got buried a little bit. So I'm curious, is that still his ultimate goal or whatever? Because I'm pretty sure he still hasn't forgiven him for the fact that they outed Liz, calling her by using her real name as Masha. They opened up the door for all this stuff to happen, to have Kirk find her. She was hidden away until they outed her real name. So I doubt he's forgiven them for that yet. So the question is, what did he get from the cabal, those ideas, and what does he plan to do with them? Is this connected to Kurt or not? Because he would like this whole, because like Reddington was very tight-lipped about like what this whole situation was about, the whole Lindquist concern, like how they were connected to Kurt, what this all was connected to. But the fact of the matter, maybe this has to deal with Kirk's surgery or something like that. Maybe finding an alternative to kind of trade Kirk for Agnes or something like that. I don't know. He's planning something, and I'm very curious to find out what that is. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about in this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.